Good afternoon, members, officers and any other members of the public in the public gallery or viewing on the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cohn and I'm chairing this meeting. My vice chair is sitting to my right, Richard Stobar, and I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you have before you the main agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and the use of the images and sound recordings for a webcast and archive recording. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to the Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet at its meeting on the 25th of November. So if we go on to the agenda, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do, Chair. We've got 5 apologies. It's Councillors Drew, Earl, Hansraj, Hobro and Riprith.
Lovely, thank you for that. So we'll move on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations that they'd like to declare? Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 7, the Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund, that report. I'm also a town councillor for Camborne Town Council, and they've been in receipt of quite a considerable number of those grants, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to be involved in that discussion.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lehman. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say that this matter has come before the County Council, but I made no determination at that meeting. So I come to this matter afresh.
Thank you for that. If we don't have Councillor Fain.
Chair, since I won't be voting, then it may well be that a declaration is not necessary on my part, but I should make clear that at the County Council, I did vote for one of the options in item 5 to be put forward, included in the discussions. So I don't come to this with an entirely fresh mind.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fain. I can't see any other members declaring any interest. Obviously, if any do come up during the course of the meeting, please just declare them as we move forward. So we will move on to public questions. There hasn't been any public questions submitted, so we will move on. So the first agenda item is local government reorganisation, papers 5 to 834, and you can see on page 5 the what we're being asked to do, the recommendations that we note the content of the report, make comments, provide feedback on option B proposal as it's put forward in these papers set out before us. So who would like to start on this agenda item? Okay, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I have a very sort of practical question, first of all. Going through this report, there were a few sort of pieces that have got highlighted sections, like this, referring to something that's missing. So, for example, on page 96, It says table 1 at appendix XX. I'm just wondering if that will be put in time for it to get to cabinet.
Councillor Milnes, shall I come to you in the first instance, or? Yeah.
Excuse me, Chair.
No, there's no, it's fine.
I've got separate documents open for the agenda, so I'm not necessarily looking at the right page.
Okay.
Page 18? 80.
I think we have been using the main agenda.
Rather than the individual item.
Yeah, is that?
Page 96.
So I'm sorry, would you mind just repeating your question?
Yeah,
Please do,
sure. So
Councillor.
it could just be that we were posted an earlier version of this document, but there are a number of things
Highlighted
through
areas.
it, highlighted things, and then things like table 1 at appendix XX, which looks like it's
Yes.
incomplete. So I'm just wondering if
Thank you. Yes.
those things are missing.
So the document that I have was published on the 5th of November, and I'll ask our Chief Exec if there is a later version with these references adjusted.
Assistant, I went through and numbered my pages, being very paper-based. Appendix XS is the financial analysis of options A to E, and it's on page 164 of our agenda, if that's helpful.
Liz Watts, did you want to?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So there are some gaps. We will endeavour to get everything to the final Council and Cabinet meeting. There may still be a few elements that won't be attached, but it will be really clear what they are. But the vast majority of things will come to the final Council and Cabinet meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. That's great. My second question is a much broader one. So looking in, not even in the papers, just in the briefing note that's been written to us, point 4, which is on page 6 of our pack. It talks about the timeline. Following submission, the Secretary of State will consult on all valid proposals. A final proposal will then be selected by the Secretary of State, likely to be in July 2026. So my question is, how much weight does our choice have? Is it ultimately going to be a decision of the Secretary of State? How do the decisions of the various constituent councils, how do we think they will impact the end of this process?
Councillor Milnes.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I think the answer to that is in the hands of the Secretary of State, because it is he and his department that will be making an ultimate decision on these effectively competing bids. And so this before us is our bid document, and we're going to hopefully have a positive result. But we've all only got the same criteria that we're working to.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, did you want to come back? Or?
No, not really. Just to say thank you. I know it's a bit of an open question, really, but it's underpinning what we're doing, so thank you.
Councillor Fain, did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, if I may.
Please do.
I wondered whether it would be fair to say that the decision of the Secretary of State would be influenced if all the councils in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough were to come to the same view and propose the same option, but that seems unlikely to happen. And I wondered if Councillor Milnes would just confirm that there are no circumstances where it would be possible for all the councils to come to a similar view, perhaps with some amendments to boundaries.
Councillor Milnes, would it make the Secretary of State's decision easier if all the councils could agree?
That ship has sailed, Chair.
That ship has sailed. Okay, lovely. Thank you. I think that's clear. So I have got Councillor Heather Williams next.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first say the apologies from Councillor Bygott. He has become very unwell. So I did try to rush down for the start of the meeting, but I didn't quite make it, so I can't substitute for him. But if we could register his apologies.
We'll note that, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was the main thing. I've got some questions, but happy to go after other committee members, Chair, as normal.
Okay. Do we have any other committee members? Paul Bear Park.
Thank you, Chair. So, something I noticed in the report, page 101, or page 85 in the option B appendix, is the payback period. And obviously this is in the section about savings, but there is a cumulative net negative impact which peaks in 2029-30 of minus £41.8 million. And I just wondered, firstly, have I understood that correctly? I've said it very simply, but maybe there's some background to that. And I suppose my question is, how will that be funded? But actually, the other thing I wanted to say was, obviously, with option B, I haven't looked at the other options to see what may be predicted or forecast there. But I'm kind of assuming that option B is probably the best case because of the extent to which City Council and South Cams services are already, some of the shared, they're already shared services. So I'm not criticising, option B as probably an outlier in that. I'm more trying to understand whether I've understood correctly, and secondly, how that net negative impact by 29-30 would be funded.
So I'm going to defer to our Chief Exec, who, with her financial acumen, has been largely responsible for putting this together. In fact, I should, perhaps if I may, Chair, thank both Liz Watts and her City colleague, Robert Pollock, thank you, sorry, for doing with their team all the work on putting these bids together, because as you realise, it's a very substantial piece of work. So with that introduction, I'll pass over to Liz.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Liz
you.
was Watts.
This was what's.
Was Watts, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Bear Park. If you look at the table on page 99 of the pack, the table called one-off and ongoing additional costs, the costs of setting up the new unitaries are in that bottom right corner of the table, 57.5 million. And so during the first 4 years, there are costs that are greater than the savings, which is why it pays back in year 4. And so the cumulative net impact, you're right, peaks in 29-30, by which time the savings that will be delivered, and we're using the base case savings scenario, so the 42 million, start to rack up from year 4 onwards, and by year 8 get to 167.5 million in cumulative total. In terms of how it will be funded, where will the 57 million come from? The government have been really clear that it won't be funded centrally. You'll see in a separate part of the business case that there's analysis of the reserves of councils going into unitary, and one of the I think advantages of option B is that the reserves pot of each council joining the 2 new unitaries is more balanced than the other options. So each council starts with roughly the same total amount of reserves, and it's expected that those reserves would be used to fund the transition.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Bear Park.
Thank you. Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Just on the same topic, I suppose, trying to get a sense of the certainty of these numbers, whether to what extent is the uncertainty understood. Obviously, the further out you go, there's more uncertainty. I can understand that, but in terms of the costs, certainly in the short term, and the risks associated with that net negative. I'm just trying to understand that a bit better, if that's possible.
Liz Watts?
Yes, I'm going to defer to Liz again on this,
yeah.
but clearly all forecasts are wrong. I mean, the question is how accurate they may be, isn't it? Again, I'll pass over to Liz, as she's been diligently working on these numbers for us.
Liz, yeah.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So on costs, there are some areas where they're quite accurate because we've done a huge amount of work on them. So if you look at programme management, for example, my colleague Jeff, who has undertaken the experience of moving to a unitary, did a huge amount of work on what would the programme management requirement be, and we've costed it down to the kind of this number of posts, these grades, this is what it would cost. ICT, we have a really detailed review by some ICT consultants who helped us on the shared service review. Again, so that's, really, really detailed. Costs where we haven't done things before. So, for example, new council's public comms branding, I've put in there 800,000. We've used other councils who have been through unitary, and we've kind of basically been guided by what it's typically costed other councils. So there's a mix of some things where I'm kind of, confident that the costs are as accurate as they can be, and somewhere we've been guided by other councils.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Fairpark.
No, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just interested in a little bit of comparison between the reports that we've received. So I'm looking at the table on page 24, which was looking at the various options compared against the government criteria for reorganisation, which has the criteria, economy and housing, financial resilience, etc., down to democracy and engagement. And on page 24, that indicates that option B has the best score and the least risk. I didn't do a great deal of comparison, but if you look at the table on page 196 of our agenda, which is page 12 of the option A case, the option A and option B are almost direct, they're almost inverse, in that they're the same, they're written in slightly different language, but the criteria are broadly the same. But option A and option B come out the opposite way round. And I just wanted to clarify that in my understanding, the officers looking at this were given the same information, and yet these options have come out with a very different assessment of rank. Now, firstly, am I looking at the same data in these two tables? But can you give any explanation as to why option A should have come out as being basically all green with just one amber, and option B should have come out largely red and amber on the option A? I know that's not the one that our council worked up, but can you explain why there's that difference?
Brian.
I'll direct that to Liz again, thank you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So paragraph 10 of my report does attempt to guide members, I'm really clear that all of the options appraisals differ because they reflect different councils' perceptions or judgments about the various criteria. So talking about the data, I led the finance and data workstream, and there is a set of data that we've all shared. So some of the data we've used is identical, and that's largely data about the councils, so councils' budgets, numbers of employees, assets, so it's about the council's data. And that was kind of started in January this year, actually, when we collected that data. There are other data sets where we have used different data, different data will always tell a different story. But also, you might use the same data and tell a different story. So option A, for example, looks much more, so if you look at population, option A bases a lot of its case on equal population and equal land mass. So in option B, we're clear that we're not challenging the population or the land mass, but we are saying that the economic data is more important, and so that's why we put more weight on the economic data than the population or the land mass. So I understand that it's kind of counterintuitive that we, will come out with different scores, and, I guess that is the nature of people approaching the business case proposals through a different lens, or giving different weight to criteria in different ways.
Yes.
Councillor Mills has indicated to speak.
Yes, I'm just going to relate my own reading of this when going through the business case. And it's clear it's about the economy from our perspective. So the landmass that was just mentioned, for example, looks largely uneven between the northern and the Greater Cambridge option, except so it's 2 to 1 in population, similar in terms of geographical land area, but the GDP of those two areas is very close. I think there's a difference of about 17%, not the 2 to 1 ratio that the population or geography might indicate. And that goes all the way through our business case. So it's about economy, it's about disparity between different ways of working in different places. It's about the deprivation levels, for example, which are all pretty consistent in our business case. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnan, did you want to add anything?
That's helpful, thank you. And
Thank you.
it confirms that you were looking at the same data, but perhaps with some different
On this point.
slants on it, as it were. Thank you.
Councillor Neiman, you want to come in on this point?
It's related to this point. So yes, looking at the population, I was just looking at page 37, and it's roughly 1/3, 2/3, isn't it, when you look at the populations. I completely accept the weighting of the economic GDP strengths of the different areas. But my question in relation to this sort of ratio is, how will that work from a democratic point of view within the combined authority? How will we ensure that this smaller population, South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City, aren't always the junior party at the table at the combined authority because we're representing a smaller group of people?
I think that's an excellent point. Councillor Brian Mills.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to pass this. As I understand it, there will be a weighted vote system, but I don't know whether that's accurate. Liz.
Liz what?
So we're unique in local government reorganisation because we are the only area that already has a combined authority. But from experience of other places that have combined authorities, typically if there are only 2 unitary councils in an area of a combined authority, each unitary would have the same number of representatives. So we might expect to send 2 representatives from each council to the combined authority. So that would mean that there'd be 2 from Greater Cambridge and 2 from Northern Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and then the mayor. So that would be a board of 5 people. I don't think there's any risk that our area with a smaller population would be sort of considered a sort of lesser party in the combined authority. There's no doubt that Cambridge and surrounding areas are the kind of driving force of the economy. But even, notwithstanding that, there would be equal representation, is our proposal. Obviously, it's up to the government, when they choose whichever option they choose, to lay statutory orders that actually explicitly state how those sorts of things would work.
Okay. Councillor Williams, do you want to come in on this point? Or,
No, I did just want to come on that point because I mean, that seems very unfair. And if I was in Huntingdonshire, Peterborough or wherever, under option B, I'd say it's very unfair that one area with 227,000 people gets the same votes as an area with, significantly more. That just seems really unfair. So, I mean, we might be proposing equal votes, but how realistic is that, given the huge disparity in populations. Because it does just seem really unfair.
I'll bring Liz Watson. I'm conscious that Councillor John Williams can come in next. Did you want to go first, Councillor Williams, or did?
Well, I was just going to point out that the makeup of the current Combined Authority Board has inconsistencies because we have East Cambridgeshire, which is considerably smaller than the other districts, has the same number of representatives on the board. And I don't believe that has ever been challenged by anyone. And therefore, you know, there is precedent at the moment not to have representatives per population, but rather representatives of the authorities that are represented on that board.
Thank you for that. Liz Watts.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Thank you. On this point, Councillor Bradnam? New point. Fine, thank you. Councillor Lehman, did you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. We'll move on. So I was going to bring Richard Stobart in next, and then we'll come to you shortly.
Chair, thank you. I'll just take a slightly different tack, and what we saw here was several reports, all of different qualities and emphases, and we've already pointed out some of the differences in the way the assessments were made, and yes, it's down to the viewpoint of that particular council. It was intriguing to see the four that I read, I think there are five altogether, but there's four distinct styles in the presentation. And if I just go to South Cam's presentation of option B just felt to be the most aspirational. There were aspects of it, things like local engagement, for example, the emphasis on primary health care and how it could be delivered locally and so on, which really came over quite strongly. I do have to commend the county for the use of Sankey diagrams. I don't know if anybody picked that up, but I'm a thermodynamicist by background, and that was my territory. But they've used it in a really intriguing way to relate population centres to respectively healthcare and trips to the so-called anchor cities. Just an observation, but I think the South Cambs report comes over as aspirational. Now that puts, I think, a particular burden on the way the evidence gets used and how the projections are made and portrayed. So that kind of language, I think, was okay, but it does perhaps indicate where there might be some pressure felt. Now, ultimately, I suspect the government is going to judge this on hard numbers, but I think the essence of the report is from that point of view, very positive. Now, I just had one or two questions. The way, for example, local representation gets worked out, presenting something which is a little different from the current structure of parish councils. Are we prepared to put that in more certain terms and put some flesh around it? Second, and maybe not really related, is does this change as local government or change of structure allow us to be different, approach differently some of the more demanding contracts that we have to agree, for example, with the providers of social care, for example, where there's a lot of pressure?
Let's take those, because there's a few points there, and then we'll come back. Yeah?
Okay, one more.
Lovely. Councillor Milnes.
Yeah, thank you. So on your question about representation, clearly this has been exercising most of us that were elected representatives. And there's going to be clearly far fewer representatives under the new systems than currently. We've gone for a figure that looks like 125 and 65 for our different unitaries in Northern Cambridgeshire and Peterborough at 125 and 65 in Greater Cambridgeshire. That's a significant reduction from the existing And my own ward of Sawston, for example, has 4 representatives, 2 county and 2 district councillors, and that's going to be significantly reduced under a new scheme. So there's a lot of work being identified in the report before you about this and about how it may work, and it will still need to be ratified by the new authority or authorities as they come into existence for them to work this through. But clearly, the number, and there's, as I say, there's quite a lot of detail in the report before you about how that might work, and including, for example, parishes or non-parished areas, for example, and how that might go. And there's a question underlying that, for example, about those lacking parish precepts, for example, and if there's some, a lack of equitability in that regard. I think I'll also, if I may, Chair, invite Liz to catch anything that I've left behind.
Yeah.
Thank you, and just through you, Chair, just one thing to add. I think the government has been really clear that they want to see more neighbourhood working, and that ties in really, really closely with the neighbourhood planning that the Health Service has just announced in their 10-year plan. And so we've tried to reflect that in the business case, and we've tried certainly not to undermine the importance of parish councils. They'll always be really, really important, but to show kind of examples of good practice in either in our own area or other kind of places outside of Greater Cambridge where there are really good examples of working in and with communities. Yeah, on the social care, was the question about how will contracts be managed differently?
Yes, because they're very disadvantageous, I understand, to the county. Is this an opportunity to, in a sense, redress the balance, renegotiate, in more favourable terms? Basically seize the agenda on the part of local government as opposed to suppliers.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't really speak to the unfavourability of the contracts, but what I could speak to is the benefit of bringing a wider range of services together, and bringing in services like housing and open spaces and leisure into social care, and also kind of some elements of health potentially gives a lot more opportunity to sort of address issues in a much more preventative way, rather than just kind of deal with things downstream. And that's really very much the way that the government is keen that councils move, because the downstream is just it's too onerous. The volume is too great, and it's not possible to keep funding social care if all you do is deal with the situation when it becomes an issue.
Thank you. What I'll do is I'll move on and I'll come back. So, Councillor Richard Williams, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Got a few points. Just one small point. I'm sure this will probably happen when this becomes public, but there's no index page for option B, which made it really difficult to find things. I'm sure it will have an index page by the time it gets to, at least at the front anyway, by the time it gets to other people. So just a couple of points really. I mean, one substantive one that's kind of picking up on the disparity in size earlier, it is about the ability of smaller unitaries to be resilient when it comes to things like people services, particularly social care, because we are, having, as we've said, 2 unitaries, or at least the proposal in B is 2 unitaries of very unequal size, which is obviously not compatible with what the government said it wants. I mean, I do worry about that, particularly in terms of long-term sustainability and being able to deliver, people services at scale. And that's one of the things I think that is picked up in, I think it was Huntingdonshire's analysis of option C, where they raised some concerns about that sustainability. So I'm just wondering what the response would be on that. Just generally, I did just want to point out one thing. The option B report, I think page 50, sort of tries to make an argument about the affinity of East Cambs and Huntingdonshire, which I thought was unconvincing in the sense of I don't think the people of Six Mile Bottom probably feel they've got much in common with the people of St Neots. But, you know, the people in the north may well do because they sort of border each other. And it makes various assertions about, you know, restoring historic counties. But then the Huntingdonshire proposal, or rather the county proposal, then makes exactly the opposite case and draws on history to point out that the south of East Cambs was historically united with Cambridge, and the Isle of Ely was basically Ely and the Fens. I think it weakens the cases, all of them, when people are clasping at historical straws, I'll be honest, because I think it's a matter of opinion, frankly. And I don't think that's a very strong aspect of the proposals.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brian Milnes.
I'm just wondering about where the questions were in there rather than the observations.
Social care.
Okay, so I'm going to pass that to Liz. Thank you.
Liz Watts, please.
Thank you, and it's a really good question, and one that, you know, we actually spent a lot of time on. If you go to page 117 of the pack, there's a chart at the bottom of page 117, which is a comparison of population size with outstanding Ofsted-rated children's services. And you'll see there that Greater Cambridge is in and around the middle of the population size of councils that already have outstanding Ofsted children's services. And that was included to show that there is, you know, a bit of there's something of a narrative around greater scale, meaning better services. The District Council Network have done a fair amount of work on this, and there does not appear to be any correlation between greater scale and better services. But there is evidence that you can deliver outstanding services with smaller councils.
Thank you for that. Councillor Richard Williams.
Yeah, so just a quick comment on that. That's interesting. I suppose I was coming at it from a slightly different point of view, more in terms of financial resilience. And I'm kind of thinking long term here. Yes, the economy of, you know, Greater Cambridge at the moment might look, you know, good, but who's to say in 20, 30 years it's going to be the same, and that, you know, economic power might not have moved somewhere else. And if you have a smaller unitary, you could be leaving it long term exposed. So I was wondering if there was any. I understand the analysis of the here and now, but I'm thinking about longer term risks and changes in, you know, centres of economic wealth concentration.
If I may, Chair, a couple of observations on what you were saying. For example, the government seems to have certainly shifted its opinion about size of the new authorities. So from a starting point of wanting, you know, around 500,000, that's been reduced significantly in statements since. I think I'll then pass to Liz the other parts of your question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think if you look at page 166 of the pack, there's a table there that isn't particularly well outlined as a table, I'm afraid, table X funding to budget ratio. So this table identifies the funding that will come through the fair funding review for each option. That's the first column. And the predicted net spend, which was a piece of analysis that we did, drawing together the budgets of the district councils and the disaggregated budget of the county council. And you'll see there that the difference for option A and B is both positive, meaning that if, you know, technically they would be in surplus at the beginning. Now that, you know, there are a lot of moving parts in large kind of social care budgets, and so I'm not saying, you know, that's categorically what will happen, but the analysis that we've done shows that they are sustainable from the beginning, unlike option C. I think the important thing to note then in terms of, you know, what will change by 2040, funding for things like social care is needs-based. It comes from the relative needs formula that is designed by the government and comes through the Fair Funding Review. And so if social care needs changed in an area, the funding would follow the need of the area in theory. And, you know, I'm probably oversimplifying things a little bit here, but so that I hope responds to your question, Councillor Williams.
Just a quick one though that does come back onto that table. Am I reading it right that in that table that there is less of a disparity between the two authorities in A than in B? Because in B it looks like there's a massive surplus in Greater Cambridge, but quite a small marginal surplus in Northern Cambs, whereas it's lopsided, but it's less lopsided in option A. Am I reading that right? So A looks better across both authorities.
Marginally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I think we'll move on to Councillor Leeming. You're next. Is it something on this? Okay, Councillor Leeming. I'm happy if it's on. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. I was also quite separately looking at this table, and it's coming back to the fact that the government charged the authorities making a submission to ensure that their submission made a viable option for both unitary authorities in where they had suggested 2 unitaries. And the sort of observation is that the City of Cambridge and South Cambs would appear to have a lot of employment, a lot of housing, and be financially relatively secure, whereas the North Unitary would appear to have, and I think you say under debt on the next page from this, it's said in the report, generally those proposed unitaries that incorporate Peterborough will have more challenging issues as Peterborough has lower than average usable revenue, reserves, a higher than average need to borrow and a higher debt gearing. But elsewhere there's also been an indication of greater indices of deprivation. And so what I would welcome is an explanation that where there are greater demands for social care over a larger area and over an area with larger social deprivation, how does the money work out and the financial resilience work out when the southern option appears to be wealthy and the northern option appears to be not so well off?
Councillor Milnes.
Yes, I mean this has been a thread of our considerations in building this business case. I'm going to pass to Liz very shortly, but it has been the focus of some attention because the disadvantaged proportion in the northern is particularly notable compared with, as you've rightly pointed out, the financial advantage of the Greater Cambridge option. So I'll let Liz pick up on that and go through some of the detail. Thank you.
Can I just add to Councillor Bradnan's point? If you look at page 10, point 27, I think that somewhat reflects sort of equality, that you've addressed that and looked at that. But I could be reading that incorrectly. What I found difficult about that, I know it doesn't really, but what it kind of almost implies is that with, you know, options A and C, you would almost have a more inequality, essentially, is how I sort of read that. But via option B, i.e. not having as much deprivation and poorer areas within the, we get around equality just by having those in a different local authority, but also sort of implies a heavier burden on whatever the other makeup of the other authority is, depending on which option we went for. So I wondered, because I was going to ask that anyway, I wondered if we could work that into Councillor Bradnam's question. Liz Watts.
Thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned to Councillor Richard Williams, demand for social care is funded. So there's a funding formula that follows the demand. So so wherever the demand is, that's where most of the funding goes. And Peterborough is included in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's local government reorganisation because it is a fragile authority. And if you look at the levels of council tax that it's charging nearly £200 below the average unitary, and that it, to some degree explains why it's a fragile authority, because they charge considerably less than most unitaries. So it is certainly the case that the more authorities that you combine with Peterborough, the more you spread the risk across those authorities. And talking about option A and C inequality, it's not that the inequality goes away, and it certainly wasn't intended to say, well, we'll move all the inequality somewhere else.
Kind of how it reads in that point, yeah.
I absolutely, completely accept that is how it reads, and it wasn't at all meant to be how it read.
Yeah, I accept that.
So apologies for that. What it was meant to say is that a larger, more resilient Northern Authority will be able to respond to those inequalities and demands in a more financially resilient way.
Yeah, if I
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. My understanding of that element was that if you had Peterborough with its needs, with just Huntingdonshire and Fenland, that would be a very difficult and financially not resilient unit. And by adding East Cambs into it, it makes that unit more secure. That was my understanding, and that was why I wanted to just check that if that was the way this plan seeks to reduce the risk.
Let's just get clarification on that.
So it's certainly true, but I don't think you'll have heard me talk about the Rubik's Cube a lot. One side of the Rubik's Cube is social care and financial resilience, another side is the economy. And if you look at paragraph 17 of my report on page 9, option A by 2040 would create an economic imbalance of 40 to 50% with the Southern Council, meaning the Southern Council is going to become more and more dominant economically in either option A or option C. So all of these, kind of contributing factors, whether it's social care or the economy and housing, are all reasons why we have kind of landed on option B as the most balanced option for a number of different reasons and criteria.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll come to Councillor Lehman, then I've got Councillor Heather Williams.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions that are sort of scattered about a bit, but my first question was to do with sort of synergy. So we know that we've already got the shared waste service, we've already got the shared planning service. I was wondering about things like the sort of other quite significant things that both Cambridge City and South Cambs do, so things like managing housing stock, collecting collecting council tax and things. Do we work on the same system? Do we have the same sort of operating systems? Will it be easy to run these things together practically?
Councillor Mills.
So we do have the same system for our housing stock, although to say that you have the same system isn't necessarily the end of the story, because you can use the system very differently. I think, though, just in terms of shared services, while it certainly it gives us a good head start were option B to be chosen in terms of things like planning and shared waste. The complexity around local government reorganisation is disaggregating the county's budget. We know how to do shared services because we've done it before and we've sort of got a playbook for it. We haven't here disaggregated the county's services before, and that's where the complexity comes in. So I haven't and wouldn't oversell option B on the basis that we've already got some shared services.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Liz. So that was going to lead me into my second question, which was health. So as I understand it, our ICB is structured primarily around 3 counties, and if we chose to break away with 2, how would this sort of sort of fragmentation of the existing ICB and the health structure around that, how would that actually function, particularly given its sort of crucial nature for things like social care?
I'm going to pass straight to Liz, who was discussing this with the local parish council liaison committee the other day, so I see she's well prepared for that sort of question.
So the ICB is expanding significantly. So we were just Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We will now be Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Hertfordshire, Luton, Milton Keynes and Bedfordshire. And I guess, in a sort of slightly kind of weird meta parallel, it's like it's becoming a unitary. So the ICB is getting much bigger and will have much more strategic responsibilities, leaving the real delivery of health at integrated neighbourhood level. And we already have integrated neighbourhood teams within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough delivering in patches within each locality. So I think there's been some concern raised, certainly by the hospitals, that they feel that option A has a geography that aligns with the existing South and North Place partnerships, and that the geography fits the patient flows linked to those hospitals. I think the case that we've tried to make is that actually, when you look at patient flows from CUH, for example, loads of patients come from Cambridge, from Norfolk and Suffolk and Hertfordshire and Essex. And so I think it's a bit misleading to say, patient flows are just about Cambridgeshire. And actually, if you look at the reablement outcomes for patients from those other counties, they're quite a lot better than Cambridgeshire. And so we have we've got a really great opportunity to be able to improve things. And I think unitary will really help us do that, because we will join up the sorts of things that mean that we can help keep people at home, whether that's using our own housing stock, using the Home Improvement Agency, using our kind of community development capacity, etc., etc. So it's not, it's not a neat solution, but it does only require moving to integrated neighbourhood teams from Ely North and Ely South to the North Place partnership to match the existing structures. And again, if you go back to the Rubik's Cube, option A has a more complete side in terms of looking at health on a Rubik's Cube. I don't think option B is necessarily hugely at a disadvantage, because it's not quite so straightforward in terms of the geography.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. So actually, sort of listening to you, I'm just thinking it's actually rather unfortunate that the national government has decided to both restructure local government and health at the same But is it out of our control? But I just felt the need to say that because that's too many things in flux at once. Thank you for that. So I'm wondering perhaps we would see an increase in our sort of community-focused healthcare and trying to improve people's quality of life from a more local level. Am I understanding what you're saying? Thank you.
Liz Watts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I was particularly proud to be able to use on page 123 of the pack, Melbourne Hub as a really brilliant example of how we've, you know, our community in Melbourne, led by local councillors there, working in partnership with the County Council and the District Council and the Health Service, have created a really incredible facility there. That has, you know, was a really difficult thing to set up, and it would be easier to do those sorts of things if we were working at a unitary level.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So my second question is to do with other local government organisations that are sort of in our orbit. So I was sort of thinking particularly about the Community Safety Partnership. And so at the moment, it's not particularly about one option or another. It's a question about how these things are protected and preserved going forward. For instance, we have a South Cambridgeshire local policing team. We have a South Cambridgeshire Community Safety Partnership. In whatever form the unitary goes in, South Cambridgeshire will not be an entity as we know it. So what steps will we take with these sort of wider community organisations that have aligned themselves on our lines for some time?
So I noticed from today's news that we won't have to have the Police and Crimes Commissioner involved in those bodies anymore, but perhaps we do reference the community safety partnerships in the business case, so I'll let Liz expand on that. Thank you.
Liz, yeah.
Thank you. So community safety partnerships are kind of statutory requirements of any local authority. And we do talk about it a bit on page 126. Some of these things will be this will be the responsibility of the new authority to decide how do they want to structure their community safety partnership. And there's nothing to say to stop them having two kind of strands of the community safety partnership. Or they may say, well, we'll just have a single one and work at different levels, whether it's kind of urban issues or rural issues, or you know, it will be up to the new authority to do that. But community safety partnerships are kind of a really, really important building block of how we work with communities and at a neighbourhood level, and they certainly won't go away.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Yeah, I'm on the Community Safety Partnership, and I'm very keen to see it be continue with its strength as it goes forward. I'm just thinking about the other sorts of organisations that are structured on our district. You know, things like South Cambridge Police. Will they change, or will they continue to have a structure which is referencing an entity or a geographical area that doesn't legally?
Councillor Mills.
I think Liz has just said it. If the range of services that we will have to offer the public won't change in this. They'll be moved around. They'll be split up and possibly in some cases joined together if we decide to do shared services on a wider basis. But I'll let Liz contribute usefully.
Anything to add to that, Liz?
Well, I mean, it's form follows function, really. I think the police will decide what's the best way to organise themselves, and they may want to stay how they are, they may want to change.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So I have one last question. So within the new unitaries, whatever shape they take, there will be some services which will be very much centred within that new unitary boundary. But particularly the transport strategy will bleed out of whatever area, because we won't all stay put in our new unitary. So, it's true, isn't it? Yes. So, particularly in terms of things like East-West Rail, it's running through the south of Huntingdonshire, the south end of East Cambridgeshire. There's many sort of villages along the edge of the sort of north of Cambridge and East Cambridgeshire that are really very close and within Cambridge orbit. So how will we work together with whatever new unitary takes place to ensure that we have a coherent transport strategy across whatever the boundaries will be?
Councillor Mills.
Yeah, so clearly transport crosses all the boundaries, as you've indicated. We won't be corralled into our new unitaries and not allowed to leave, at least without a visa. You'll see that the Combined Authority is the transport body, and the mayoral authorities will have extended capabilities from at least April 2026 onwards, when they're reviewed in their current status, and they will be the responsible body for working through our transport plans, and indeed they're working on them now. I mean, it's slightly ironic, of course, that in Cambridge, in Greater Cambridge at the moment, we are talking about actually adding a layer of government with a DevCo, when at the same time that we're being asked to reduce the number of layers of involvement. But the GCP, for example, which I obviously have an interest in as a board member, will likely be subsumed into one of the new unitaries moving out. And they obviously have some significant contribution to make to that local transport development. The Cambridge Growth Company will have a requirement for adding to that infrastructure. You know, we've been promised 400 million towards infrastructure recently from the government, so it will get a portion between those various bodies. I don't know whether Liz has any more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mills. I'm just going to bring Councillor Stobart in on this point. He just wanted to...
It's okay, so I just have to declare an interest. I'm a member of Rail Future, the campaigning group. Just to that point, there were just a couple of things that could considerably enhance, well, actually, the background is the county talked about the long journey times across the, you know, in option B, if you will, that kind of horseshoe-shaped collection of districts. So to go from Peterborough to you know, the southeastern extremity of the new unitary, it takes quite a long time. But actually, there are a number of transport propositions, such as Ely North or a Peterborough to Ely electrification, would considerably enhance the case, or, if you will, the kind of transport integrity of that proposal. So, yeah, just to comment, you know, given what was said, but there are some specifics out there that could serve future transport needs very well. Yeah.
So if I may, Chair, in relation to that, I mean, it's slightly disappointing that the Cambridge South Station has just been announced it's going to be delayed in delivery, but covering another topic in terms of health service provision, clearly that is a regional centre. The Cambridge South has got a big role to play in that, so the sooner that's available, the better for us all, irrespective of local government reorganisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Obviously, I'm sure as it goes through, we'll all have our opinions on LGR and the way it's been handled. I just wanted to ask a question on page 8 of the reports, as I've got it online. I appreciate there are some sort of discrepancies. But basically, it's got the pictures, the maps, it's got D and E at the top, and then it's got the lead councils and contributing councils. So obviously, option B, we list 3 contributing councils, but not on the other options. So just wondering, is that because like we haven't contributed to other things, or how does that work out? So that was my first question.
Let's take that one first, and then we'll come back. Liz Watts.
So that table is specifically about drafting the business cases. So early on, as I mentioned, I think you were here, Councillor Williams, when I mentioned it, we set up a finance and data work stream when we collected a lot of data. That was kind of January, February of this year. So there was, everybody worked on the data together. But in terms of writing the business cases, we've had nearly all councils involved in supporting option B business case and actually drafting, quite big chunks of the business case. The other 4 business cases haven't kind of relied on the help of other councils.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Okay, because the word contributing sort of doesn't mean drafting. We have the lead council, which is drafting on things. So are we saying that we have not contributed to any other business cases at all? Or is it that we just didn't write anything that got lifted in? So what has our interaction been on the other options? Or is this council, residents only represented in one option?
Liz Watts.
So apart from the shared data, we haven't contributed. I haven't actually seen the Cambridgeshire County Council's business case yet because it hasn't been published. I've seen obviously the report. We haven't contributed, no councils contributed. So as far as I know, nobody contributed to the Huntingdonshire cases apart from Huntingdonshire, or to the Peterborough case apart from Peterborough.
Councillor Williams.
Lastly on this particular point, is that because we've not been included, or is it because we've not offered?
Liz Watts.
I think we weren't asked to support, and writing our own business case was an enormous task, and so we focused on delivering that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So on another point, it's already been said about the sort of disparity in the population sizes, and when I've sort of gone through the report, obviously there's a lot of chunky material in there, so maybe it was an oversight, but the sort of appreciation of there are overheads to running authorities and how that's been broken down per resident, because obviously if you've got a smaller electorate base to push those overheads over, they are therefore going to be more vulnerable to council tax increases and particular shocks, particularly if you've got your economy sort of centred in one place. We are heavily, obviously, here reliant on the biomedical campus, and coming in just with Cambridge does make us a little bit more vulnerable. So just wondering in here where that sort of appreciation has been found.
Liz Watts.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean, Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams.
What I mean is a smaller electorate size means those costs of running the authority are spread across less people than they are. There are naturally overheads to running an organisation, every subscription, every sort of, how many buildings you have, etc. So those overheads are spread over fewer people. And when you've got a local economy that is very loaded and dominated in one particular sector, you are more vulnerable to if there are any shocks in that. So in looking at thinking option B is a good, I refer to what you said, there's no risk of becoming a junior partner, but that's a reliance on our local economy. But our local economy is not immune to shocks if particular sectors take a downfall. Looking at national and global economies, particularly with the budget coming up, I think we're all a bit nervous on that one. But what appreciation has been given, because that's something that I just don't see in the option B business case. But I'm happy to take your comments on it.
Liz Watts. Councillor Mills.
Just before I bring in Liz on this, one of the aspects of the Cambridge phenomenon is that by and large we have been resilient to such shocks on an economic basis. Well, so far, and it's not to say, but we got through remarkably unscathed economically from COVID, for example, and the CBRE data on employment has shown a consistent resilience to economic travails elsewhere. But I'll bring on Liz in after that comment. Thank you.
Liz Watts.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your point before, but I do now. So in terms of being a small organisation, all of the unitaries are bigger than the current organisations. And so that's why we can deliver savings through economies of scale by joining together. In terms of the kind of the shocks of the economy, I think one of the things that the Fair Funding Review has done, so shocks to economy mean, you know, I suppose potentially, traditionally in councils, that would have an impact on business rates. What the Fair Funding Review has done is redistribute business rates in a way that actually points them in the direction of social care need and funding social care, rather than, you know, districts have benefited hugely from business rates for many years, and that benefit has now, or from April, will now disappear. And so no council will be quite so exposed to those sorts of shocks because of the Fair Funding Review and the way that the funding has been, if you like, kind of realigned.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
So, in relation to the overheads and those, because obviously if you have, you know, a big employer that stops employing, or actually we saw in the latest information that came to the GCP how job creation has slowed down, and whereas we got through COVID as an area very well, actually at the moment we're not doing as well as expected. So that can then risk to more people being out of work. We have more shocks that come into hospitality, more burdens. A lot has been said about places like Peterborough through the report and the different economies and that financial imbalance, but it wouldn't happen over a couple of years, granted, but we've got to look at this long term. So is there a risk that being a smaller authority in option B, that there will not be that same resilience? That's what I still don't feel I've got a secure answer on, Chair.
Did you want to come in first, Councillor Mills?
Yeah, so in forecasting the future, we will have to rely largely on what's gone before. And that's why I expressly made reference to the CBR report that did show, for example, recently, a small slowdown in employment or additional employment. But consistently, certainly over the last 8 years that I've been involved, we have shown remarkable resilience, and there's no particular reason, I think, to be concerned that we won't continue to have continued resilience. And in fact, we are clearly a target for growth and contributing to national growth in the government's current plans, as we're aware.
Thank you for that. I'm going to bring in Stephen Kelly, then come to Councillor John Williams.
Thank you. Yes, and it's just to offer a degree of reassurance. I'm not going to go into a local plan conversation, but the forecasting that we've done for the local plan, you'll have seen successively year on year, each time we've done it, has increased the forecast jobs requirement that we have. And one of the reasons for that is that it's interesting that life sciences gets all of the headlines, but in fact the Cambridgeshire economy, our greater Cambridge economy, is dominated. If you look at the proportion of employment, actually it's not a massive part of it. And the rising figure that we've identified in the latest iteration of the local plan is in fact a consequence of what might be called the kind of normal jobs, the kind of non-life sciences jobs, and the way that those jobs interact with an increasing population. So far from being a highly vulnerable economy, actually Greater Cambridge's economy is quite diversified across both knowledge-intensive sectors, which of course have the potential to be impacted, but actually over quite a broad economic base, including tourism and so forth, which actually are entirely, or not entirely, but potentially significantly decoupled. So it's quite a resilient economy, I think, as the data suggests. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to draw the comparison between Greater Cambridge and Peterborough. Peterborough is a much larger authority than the city and South Cambs put together, and yet you look at the depth gearing of Peterborough, it's considerably higher than us. So it doesn't necessarily follow that a bigger organisation is financially more secure than a smaller organisation. And certainly in terms of Peterborough and Greater Cambridge, you can see that for various reasons over many years, Peterborough has kept its council tax down, with the result is that it's in a serious financial situation now because it doesn't cover its costs. However, that is not because it is a bigger organisation, that's a political decision, but it does mean that you can't make these comparisons. You cannot say that a small organisation will be at more risk to financial challenges than a bigger organisation, because if you compare us with Peterborough, you certainly can see that Peterborough is in a much worse financial state than we are.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I've got two more sort of major points.
Yeah, two more and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Thank you. There is one passing. There's lots of image. Just make sure they are photos and images rather than graphs and things that are in there. So one of the things which I've raised previously, which again I didn't see in here, is about when it comes to democratic representation, about ensuring that we still have diverse councils and a range of councillors. And I think more could be expanded on. So I just wanted to give some statistics that have come through. So we've had, following the LGA census, which was 2022, so it's not that long ago, definitely not in local government world. And the evidence really showed that in multi-member wards, when it comes to female representation, with larger electorates, that reduced women's representation because you had to campaign over a larger area, it required more time, more money, and we are still in a situation where women are more likely to have greater care responsibilities. So we have it in the report that actually it's going to be more electors per head, and that is concerning. And also what we could see is just 7% of councillors already were from ethnic minority backgrounds, and it again said that larger electorates can amplify that under representation, and it made it logistically harder for people that have disabilities to make sure they have representation. These are all things that I've been raising for a while, and when we have the sessions, but it's not something that I saw reflected. And when we've looked at, almost that it wasn't even born a consideration when coming to the figures of how many councillors there should be in each authority. Now, it could be that it was considered but not included, or it wasn't considered at all. So what happened when it comes to ensuring equality and diversity in our councils?
Thank you for that. Councillor Milnes.
Yeah, I think you were missing in the chamber earlier when we talked about representation earlier. I'll pass to Liz to address this issue over diversity. But clearly one of the concerns that we have with this is that the burden on councillors will be significantly increased because of this programme. We'll also have a lack of skill sets because the existing councillors that won't be standing for the new authorities that have built up experience in various children and young people, for example, areas of expertise may well be lost in moving forward. So there are a whole raft of issues that are created by the reduction in staff, in numbers of representatives per population. I'll pass to Liz to speak about diversity.
Thank you for that, Councillor Milnes. Liz Watts.
I mean, I don't think it necessarily follows just because you have more councillors that they will be more diverse. So I guess in my mind, in my mind, it's about how you recruit people to become councillors, and I fully accept that if it's a bigger job and a more demanding job, you might struggle to recruit people from some protected groups with protected characteristics. I think we've tried to address that here by increasing the pay of councillors, and so effectively, I think if you're a district councillor, you couldn't in any sense say that there's, pay. I think when you move into a unitary, it starts to become a bit more, it's not the equivalent of a full-time salary unless you're in a cabinet role, and then it, can potentially be the equivalent of full-time salary. But the pay is more commensurate with the workload, and therefore, you might open the pool up a little bit more in terms of diversity. I'm not sure we could do much. If you have suggestions, Councillor Williams, as to how we could address that in the business case, I'm happy to sort of take them on board.
I'm just going to bring Councillor John Williams in first, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is really down to the unitary to support its councillors so that you can get councillors from a diverse background being able to become councillors. There's ways other than increasing allowances, and certainly even in some new unitaries such as Wiltshire, for example, the allowance is still quite poor. I mean, it's only about, I think it's about £16,000 a year. Someone couldn't possibly be doing that job full time on that level of allowance. But there are other things that I think councils can do to help councillors with their workload, and but that's down to the new unitary to make those decisions. And I'm sure that certainly, I think from our side, we recognise the pressures that these councillors will be put under. Some of us who are double hatters or were double hatters, like myself when I was a county and a district councillor, it is quite a workload, to be honest, and it's a fear that I think, as Bridget has mentioned, in more a case, it's tending to be those that can afford to be a councillor will be a councillor. So we will have, male, white, middle-aged, rich people being councillors. Now we've got to try and avoid that, and I'm sure the unitary will do all it can to avoid that. So there are other things other than allowances that can help with that.
Thank you for that, Councillor John Williams. Councillor Heather Williams.
Yeah, I feel that the question hasn't fully been answered, but I can follow up after me. But just to say, it's not the evidence that I quoted here, and the studies show it's not to do with allowances, it's to do with electorate per councillor, because the geography has become, particularly in rural areas, because the geography has become more, and it makes it harder for them on that commitment. So that's what we currently have, higher electors per councillor than the rest of Europe, and they do much better in getting more diversity. So there are, if you've not read Colin Corpus's work, there's lots of studies out there that help support this. And when it came, I still don't know, when it came to deciding whether it should be 65 or how many councillors, was diversity and electors per head considered? Was it or wasn't it?
Okay. Councillor Milnes.
So I'm not particularly familiar with whether or to the answer to that question, but I know that we are constrained in terms of the numbers by legislation, and I think if Liz has got anything else to say about that, she may be more privy to that process than I am.
Liz Watts.
Thank you. So I think we followed advice from the Commission in terms of numbers of councillors, and the strong advice was that we should look at how many councillors did you need to run the council, as well as the number of electors per councillor. You'll see that it's improved significantly in terms of the electorate to county councillor ratio from what it is now. But obviously, it's never going to be as low a ratio as it is for district councillors unless we keep the same number of councillors. And the advice from the Boundary Commission was that that is something that we should not do.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. Maybe a note in there to say that the electors per head, we don't have multi-member wards, because that is a big evidence base, because you could still end up serving, you know, if you've got 3,000 electors per head, serving 9,000 if it's a triple member ward. The other thing that doesn't seem to be given much regard in option B, or actually any of the options that I've read, is about safeguards for protection of rural voices, which is something that's been voiced a lot. Because as we do see more urbanisation, South Cambs has seen its first towns and everything like that, how in a smaller authority like option B will rural voices and perspectives be protected?
Councillor Brian Mills.
So my consideration of that question is that under the reorganisation, both rural and urban areas will continue to be represented, just by smaller numbers. We're reducing the overall representation levels, so there is no inbuilt protection over rural versus urban areas. So I don't know whether we can particularly answer that question. I don't know if Liz has got any other idea about that.
Liz Watts, did you?
I mean, it was clear from the consultation that the tension between rural and urban priorities was a concern for residents, and we talk about that throughout the business case. And on page 138, we specifically talk about not overlooking the needs of rural areas. And we've tried to give some case studies that have shown how that is possible, using things like the Community Land Trust in East Cambridgeshire, and the use of SIL in Huntingdonshire. So we've tried to give some examples. I guess, we're writing a business case for a proposed geography, but we're not actually going, it's up to the new authority to decide how they will, ensure that the voices of rural areas are still heard.
Thank you for that. Very briefly, Councillor Williams, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think the issue is, like I said, there's almost signposting that goes on. What I wasn't clear on, there are no sort of safeguards. This is a business case. This is a proposal. It's not here you are and maybe you can do this and maybe you could do that. A vision has to be set in that business case. At the moment, it's like a list of options to protect rural voices, but no actual vision of, and no safeguards how that be. So as it's still being drafted, could that be toughened up, please?
Councillor Mills.
Well, we've got very little time to do a substantial amount of revision of this document, is the bottom line. We've got a tight deadline, and I'm not sure that is the place that we're at the moment. I'll refer to Liz. She may have a different perspective than me. Thank you.
Liz Watts.
So we can still change things in the business case. Obviously, it will, take some. We'll need to make sure that all partners who support it are happy with it. But my concern about saying this will definitely happen is that we're not in control of it.
Sorry, Chair. These are business cases. No one's saying about control, but if you're doing a business case, you set out how that business would work. And I think just a list of options, we know it's a priority for residents. It needs toughening up. And as you say, changes can be made. That's the whole reason this document is here today.
So I think that point has been taken on board, and we'll we'll move on if that's okay. Councillor Bradnam, I think next.
Thank you. It was just a general point about local representation, and we have in our report on page 30, the statement that this proposal would reduce the total number of councillors in the region from 331 to 190, and in terms of the split between the northern part and the Greater Cambridge part, having said that, the number of electors per councillor is the same. And I think whilst I have concerns about what that means in terms of the greater area of geography those individual councillors might have to cover, that's not something that's in our power to determine. That's for the new authority to determine, this is just for the transition period. And, as a councillor who's a twin hatter, but ably supported by co-district councillors in my district council ward, I mean, what I'm very aware of is that, we share that load between us. And, in this new arrangement, it would be a much bigger work commitment and a much more time consuming and a lot more travelling. And so I just think in this new authority, a whole new thought process is going to happen in that the new authority of how to properly remunerate councillors to make sure that we do enable people who might be in full-time work and have a really good viewpoint to put into this work, but how we enable them to take part when it's going to be obviously such a much bigger job, how we enable them to do all that journeying around over their whole area, and if necessary, how they are supported to attend parish councils or whatever. All of that is for the new authority to consider. It's not for us to determine here. It's just a recognition that needs to be taken into account if we are, as to enable a diverse range of councillors to do the job.
And I think both Councillor Milnes and Councillor Williams have made that point essentially. Would you agree? Did you want to add to it at all?
No, I think we both fully appreciate the difficulties, but it is for the new authority to take that forward.
Thank you. Liz Watts, yeah.
Could I just come back to one point that I didn't quite understand from Councillor Heather Williams? You mentioned photos and images, and I didn't quite catch what you meant there, sorry.
Yeah, in lots of places it's sort of highlighted in yellow, image, like things to be inserted. But in some parts it says diagrams. So are we going to see, are they just images, or are they diagrams, or is it going to be a mixture of things? Because obviously a diagram with a graph you'd want to scrutinise more than if it was just, insert a picture of a tree or a happy person.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to comment on that point, Liz, or?
So it will be a mixture,
Okay.
but broadly, where there's kind of data in some sort of diagram, it's already included. So you're not going to see. It might not be the finished diagram, but the data is already there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. That clarifies that, I think. So we've got Councillor Paul Bearpark next, please.
Oh, I was actually going to comment on something from some time ago.
Sorry.
But, about size,
Bring it up now.
the relationship between size and resilience, or not.
Yeah.
I think there isn't a lot of evidence that a bigger authority is necessarily more resilient. I mean, you just have to look at, there are a couple of data points. Birmingham City Council, which is, I think, the largest authority in Western Europe, and has got into tremendous difficulties. And the other one is the District Council Network report, which looked at this, which I think maybe Liz referenced earlier, if it was the same report. So, yeah, sorry to come back to something a lot earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would add to that is, can we get your steer on those differences? Obviously, there is a huge difference in numbers. So, I think in one part of the report, it talked about, by 2040 being sort of 26% difference or something. What do you think the risks are there, you know, and do you think it makes it less palatable to government putting this proposal forward because of those differences that they've quite sort of clearly set out? Yeah, please.
Forgive me. The thing I read here is that the population is broadly the same per elector, per councillor. 3,300 electors per councillor in Greater Cambridge, 3,463 in
I would agree.
North Cambridge and Peterborough.
I would agree, but that what I'm talking about is the difference, overall difference in numbers, which the government have sort of outlined as their target. So I just wanted you to comment on that, really, just to build on that point.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's a right answer here. I think the government very quickly resiled from saying it should be over 500,000 because they realised that actually that was a number that they'd picked out of the air, and there were, you know, compelling reasons sometimes for authority to be larger and compelling reasons for it to be smaller. And I guess I go back to, you know, the number of criteria that we're considering, and if you were only going to focus on population, you might choose a different option. But if you're going to focus on the range of criteria, that steers you, in my view, to option B. Notwithstanding that, the population of Greater Cambridge is growing, as you can see from a number of the kind of charts in the business case, considerably and really fast. So by 2040, it's predicted to be over 400,000, which is much bigger than most unitary authorities that currently exist. So I don't think population is necessarily something that you need to worry about overly.
Okay. Councillor Bradland, did you want? Thank you. So just another point I was going to make. Obviously, we've already referenced the report to County Council, which uses a lot of the same data, essentially. And I accept the point from Liz that we're looking at different things, you know, different councils, different priorities, different measures and so forth, but you know, is somewhat maybe concerning that, you know, when I read the county report, that on virtually all of their indicators it puts option B as their sort of the lowest score, you know, under option A, I think, which is what they were going for, and option C on virtually every indicator. And if we're, you know, I think the public might look at this and say, well, you're using broadly the same data. That I accept Councillor Bradnam's point that there are some differences in the data, but broadly the same data. And then before a full council meeting, the different councils have gone away and worked on one of those options, which I accept takes an awful lot of work, and we have to kind of have a direction of play. But might they think that it might have been better to sort of have more of a summary of each option? And I accept that there are, in your work here, lots of comparisons throughout the report, as there was in the county report, in fairness. Would it have been better to have a less sort of geared towards option B approach prior to a full, given that this really, actually in this instance, there's not a big, in my mind, there's not a big political issue here in terms of, you know, is it going to be a Labour or Conservative or Liberal Democrat council in terms of the makeup? Because look at the current polling, you would think that all of these options would be a fairly strong Liberal Democrat council. So it's nothing to do with politics as such. Would it have been better to go to that full council meeting, given every councillor sort of kind of a free vote, given that it's not a political issue, and, you know, have those more clearly separated in that way? I only ask this because that's what a parish councillor asked me in the week. Why are the reports in each council so directed to one option? Could we not have had a more unbiased steer toward, you know, not towards any of them, was their question. I accept that's difficult, but I just wondered if you could comment on that.
So I think my comment on that would would be that this process, for me, and this is my individual view, should be a technocratic one.
Yeah.
Right? And that actually political considerations ought to play a very minor part. However, I think if we believe that to be the case, that it should be technocratic versus a party political issue, then we'd be deluded to think that that was the whole story. Because clearly people will seek advantage, political advantage, out of any circumstance. Is the nature of the beast. That's where we're all at, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So that's
in
that's
these
personal.
options, there's not huge advantage in it that I can see, really, politically. Is there?
So the next point is starting from the same base point in terms of data collection, which we've described.
Yeah.
And you were asking about whether there shouldn't have been a more summary document to compare side by side. We have actually, before you today in this report, a summary and then more detailed of each of those benefits that expand on that quite substantially, so justifying the results of our deliberations, for example. Now, I don't know where the county are at the moment, but I know at the county council meeting it was described as a work in progress. I think if that's not an unreasonable representation. And so we haven't been able to do side-by-side comparisons ourselves for these options. We know, for example, that the options D and D were heavily discounted from consideration at the outset because they were a 3 unitary council proposition.
Yeah, agreed.
And that was shown to be the least economical option before us, and we rather largely discounted them. So at least that saved us some work in terms of doing any comparison with those. I'll pass the list to see if she's got anything else to add to that.
Yeah. I think you've answered, but Liz, if you want to comment, it's fine. Yeah. No, fine. Thank you for that answer, Councillor Mills. Councillor Stobart, lovely.
I just want to pick up a strand from what Stephen Kelly was mentioning earlier about the resilience of the local economy. And to pose the quote, well, just a little more context, noted in the county report that Anglia Ruskin had sent in a support letter. I did, you don't need to comment on that, I wondered where our support letters were, but that's beside the point. So the question about Greater Cambridge is the potential for new businesses, for growing the economy. Bearing in mind, just off on a tangent for a moment, we used to have we used to reflect on the businesses that we saw when I was working at Cambridge Consultants, and the one thing that we did note was that healthcare always thrives. So anything to do with healthcare thrives, come recession or growth, whatever. And so to see healthcare as a strong strand in the Cambridge economy, of course, is great for resilience, but we are seeing that diversity, and of course the Cambridge economy continues to grow in different ways. But we need to keep people, and one of the challenges that we have, of course, is keeping some of our graduates from both University of Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin, keeping them in the locality because they're good people and they know the area. So is there anything about what we're proposing here in option B which either disturbs or encourages the skills agenda? I know the skills agenda lies with the combined authority, but are we doing something here in proposing a unitary, doing anything to disturb that? And for example, housing is considered one of the things that is a barrier to our graduates staying. So just a general question, are we encouraging or discouraging the skills agenda, and could we at this late stage do something to say something positive?
You'll see in the documents that there's much reference to affordability of housing, which is a persisting problem, and the contrast between, for example, ourselves and the northern Fenland and Peterborough is dramatic. sort of half the average price. So in Cambridge and Greater Cambridge, house pricing, I think to the last survey was over 500,000 over an average price. So you'll see much reference to that and the importance of it to maintaining the ability to grow. Because without more affordable housing, without much more additional housing, which we've got in our emerging local plan, for example, then the growth that is the Cambridge phenomenon would be stifled by lack of affordable housing for those graduates and for other people migrating to our area, inward investment given. So it's clearly a very important aspect of our business plan that we're putting forward. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Thank you. I mean, housing, perhaps transport, and they might be the two things that are, most critical in retaining graduates. And if we're doing nothing to impede that, then that's a good thing. But could I just come back to a point that we were discussing earlier about, in the division of the unitaries, of course, the north part would have that greater degree of deprivation, but would attract the appropriate support, whereas in the south, less deprivation, less support, and that is a kind of, in a sense, an equality. But is there, in the way we've proposed the unitary here in option B, something that will drive down inequality both locally and perhaps across the several authorities in our future combined authority? So is there a kind of inequality agenda in there somewhere, or an inequality reduction agenda in the way we formulated things?
I'll pass to Liz to answer in more detail one of those aspects of your question. The index of multiple deprivation table within the document, I think, proves fascinating in terms of the vast difference between northern and the southern areas, including Greater Cambridge. And I think that's instructive in terms of what the local authorities, the new emerging authorities will have to consider. And inequality is at the heart of most of our concerns. We've got this horrible death rate comparison between the poorest parts of Cambridge and the more wealthy, which is, for many of us, really quite a horrible story to tell. And anything that we can do as new emerging authorities to counter that would be more than welcome. But that will largely be an issue for the new emerging unitary authorities. I don't know if Liz has got anything to add.
I mean, only to say through you, Chair, that I think option B, in terms of inequality, is particularly strong in addressing the inequality in Peterborough and Northern Cambridgeshire, because it's the most financially sustainable of the Peterborough options, and therefore creates the capacity to tackle, the kind of entrenched deprivation and inequality that is found in Peterborough and the Fens, and in the most sustainable way, in our view.
Councillor Stover.
Chair, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't think we've got any other speakers on this agenda item, so I think we'll bring that to a close there. If you look at page 5 of your agenda pack, we said at the beginning what the recommendations were, and I think we've done that. We've noted the contents of the report, we've given feedback on option B proposals. Are we all happy? That Councillor Bradnam?
I think Councillor Stobart made a good point about if there are any letters of support for option B. it would be good to have those in the pack as part of it. When it goes
as an appendix to
further.
that. I think there's nodding, so I think it's been...
No.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
I can answer the question, but they won't be in the pack.
They won't be in the pack.
No, I mean, I think, you know, we felt, I think it's difficult to ask partners to support specific options.
Okay.
Because it puts them in a difficult position if another option is chosen. And so we haven't gone out and, you know, solicited support from organisations. It may be that now that all the business cases are published, organisations come forward and say, well, now we've seen everything, we support this option. But we haven't solicited letters, and there won't be letters in the pack.
I think that seems fair. Happy, Councillor Bradham? Yeah, thank you. So I think we've done what's been asked of us on page 5 in the recommendations. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, thank you. Agreed. Lovely. So we will now move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Lehman.
Chair, I'm just wondering whether we could take a break.
Of course we can, yeah. We'll just take a very short break. If we just take 5 minutes and then come back. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, pages 835 to 910, quarter 2 performance report. Who would like to make a start on this agenda item? Anyone? Do you want to go first, Richard? Yeah.
Could I just comment on the, briefly comment on the KPIs, and this is more a general comment than specific. I think we've pressed, Scrutiny Overview have pressed quite hard on the presentation of data, Chair, and we've asked for different graphical representations, we've asked for rolling averages, and we've also asked for a commentary. And I think I would first of all like to say it comes over very well, and secondly, I'd just like to say thank you to the officers for listening in some detail to what we had what we asked for, and they've delivered. So it makes for a clearer presentation. But I'll just point out one thing that I think is not an anomaly, but is worth a comment. Is the KPI 13, the number of households with children leaving bed and breakfast accommodation after longer than 6 weeks. Probably the graph doesn't say a lot, the data doesn't, but perhaps we leave it in because of the, sorry, it's page 847. 800. KPI 13, have I got an old version of stuff? Oh.
847 online.
Okay, beg your pardon.
Maybe I've got that wrong.
But yeah. KPI 13. So we just see this little
yeah, okay, yeah,
little triangle.
Yeah.
Maybe a bar would be better, but that would be my only comment. And I think the bar is graphical, is has a certain visual impact to say this is a very occasional occurrence, and we have it under control. So yeah, I'd just like to reiterate my particular gratitude for the transformation and the presentation of this data.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Kevin and Loretta for an excellent set of KPIs and performance indicators. Very clear. I think we've come a long way over the last few years with the help of this committee to produce these documents in a very readable and they are now so much better than they used to be, and thanks to everyone for that, officers and members. There's just one thing I wanted to draw attention to was the council tax collection rate and the fact that this is KPI 106, and the fact that we are seeing more people move away from the traditional 10 months to a 12-month repayment, and we need to, I think, reflect that, think of a way how we're going to be able to predict, because obviously at the start of the year, our prediction is going to be out because of that, and obviously we'll catch up towards the end of the year. So at the end of the year, I'm sure we're going to be, up to our normal standard of being first or second in the country for council collection. But I think initially, because of the fact that many people are now choosing to pay over a 12-month period, which means their instalments are less, we need to think of some way of identifying that. But otherwise, I think this is a brilliant set of results for us, and certainly picking up those 3 areas that the Minister picked up on, does show that we have listened to this committee and we have changed those KPIs so that they better reflect, what we're achieving within the cohort of similar sized councils, which we weren't doing before. We had, completely, they were unattainable really, the previous targets. And we have now, with your help, much more sensible targets for those areas. And that's something certainly we'll be mentioning to the civil servant when he comes in a few weeks' time to discuss those three particular KPIs with regard to the 4-day week.
Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, I haven't got anything further to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for the responses.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak on Appendix B, the Strategic Indicator Report, but I don't know whether anyone else wishes to speak on the KPI specifically.
Feel free to move on and we can
Okay.
come back if we need to.
Thank you, Chair. So we're all acutely aware that we live in a very expensive area and that property is very expensive, and young people especially, but many people are struggling to buy a home. So in that context, on page 854, I was really pleased to see that we have 365 new council homes currently in the delivery pipeline, and that's gone up from 298 at the end of Q1. That's a significant jump. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about those homes. Why has it jumped up so much, and what sort of mixture of housing is in that increase, please?
Councillor John Williams.
I asked Peter to come in here. Thanks.
Yeah, Peter Campbell.
I've not done this before. No, you don't believe that, do you? So the increase in numbers really reflects our growing reputation with developers throughout the district, so that we're actively bidding for properties available through Section 106 agreements. And we've, over the past few years, we've been, due to the work of Kirsten and a team, they get to know us, they know that we're a reliable partner, so that quite often has put us in the driving seat to acquire additional properties. Helped, of course, by the properties across the road on the skip site. So the mix of properties. So when a developer comes up with a proposal for any development, not just affordable housing, Julie Fletcher's team works with Stephen's team to understand what the housing needs are within an area, including affordable housing, and we try and influence the mix to reflect what's needed in that locality.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you for that answer, Peter. So am I right in understanding that the housing strategy is underpinning some of the decisions that are made about the types of houses that we're buying?
With the housing strategy and local needs assessments, yeah.
Thank you.
Really pleased to see this. It's much needed.
Lovely. Did you have any further questions, Councillor Lehman? No, thank you. Do we have any other speakers on this item? Councillor Stobart, yeah.
Onto the business plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to refer to any particular point. Appendix C, the action plan. I just wanted to mention one or two things. Peter Campbell just mentioned the SKIP development. Sorry, I should declare my interest as being a board member of SKIP, but SKIP was proposed, the SKIP development, Campbell development, was proposed an exemplar development. In other words, something that was to, in a sense, demonstrate certain qualities in how housing could be developed and presented. I think given that, and I think our concern always to be excellent in what the council does, and to then have that acknowledged by an award. I was wondering what other exemplar developments, exemplar initiatives are we, are out there on our agenda that we're pursuing and that members would love to support.
Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, can I ask Anne to, looks like Stephen is going to help me with this one.
Stephen Kelly.
Well, it was just to say, obviously, it's a very broad question, but certainly through the planning process, we're delivering both exemplars in terms of building and environmental performance. I would say that places like the Wellcome Genome Campus, for example, will be world-class on most definitely in both housing and employment space. But as part of your emergent and current planning policy framework, clearly and positively, we're able to consistently exceed biodiversity net gain objectives, national standards on that, as well as design quality and the building performance. But Anne may well want to add to that with comments about what we're doing in places like Northstowe.
Anne, lovely.
Thank you. So, yes, the only thing I'd add is I know members recently we were talking about Northstowe and the developments that we have over there, particularly the community development. So members will be familiar with the fact that we're building the Unity Centre over in Northstowe. That is due to open in the new year. We are very excited about that building, and that is a building of extremely high environmental quality and design. We've already had feedback from those working on the building that they would be potentially interested in putting that forward for awards in the future once it is opened. And we really see that as an exemplar project which sets the baseline for hopefully the rest of the projects that will come forward in that area.
Councillor John Williams, did you want to come in on this as well? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment that I just had a pinch myself because I looked through this and it was all green, and I thought, hold on a moment, I must have missed something here. So I've just gone back again, and there isn't a single amber or red on that chart. So congratulations to everyone.
Councillor Stobart.
I know we've touched on it before a few times, Stephen. The hidden things sometimes, can be very compelling, and achievements in water conservation, and also I think the district heating scheme that's certainly being talked about for the city centre. I think two examples of things that are in a sense out of view, but nevertheless particularly compelling. I think we were all excited to, when we first understood about Eddington, about the proposals for the water scheme there, and some of the things coming forward and mentioning the local plan are also particularly compelling. So I'll consider that a comment. I think paying attention to these things just gives us an insight, which makes our both from members and officers helpful to what we're planning.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stobart. I was just going to, so I should have done this at the beginning. The officers had advised me that there was a slight amendment, so I was just going to read that out, and then Councillor Lehman, I'll come on to you. So to the report that we have in front of us. So officers have advised me, I'll read it out, advised me of a correction to Appendix A. The target and intervention levels for KPI 11 should read 0.9% target and 1.34% intervention. This is in place of the 4.4% and 8% that have been incorrectly included in this within this report. The original numbers read 0.9% and 1.34%. This is in place of the 4.4% and 8% that have been incorrectly included within this report. The target and intervention levels shown on the line chart are correct. That's what I've been asked to read out from officers. Does that make sense, Councillor Bradman, where if you've got that?
Talking about the graph on page 842. So.
Correct.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Okay, yeah. Yeah. It was just a clarification point I was asked. I should have done that at the beginning. That was my oversight. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at page 870, which is another strategic indicator report section. And it's about feedback on performance and satisfaction with South Cambs District Council services. I had a question actually about the mystery shopper exercise. I wanted to understand who had undertaken that. I think it would be quite helpful to know what company it was, but it's actually it's very interesting to read that it had an 81% satisfaction score compared with a benchmark of 68 amongst other councils, 68%. So I think it's quite a nice reassuring statistic, but it would just be good to know who had undertaken the mystery shopper exercise.
Councillor Mills?
Yes, I think Jeff Membry was the officer responsible for that.
Who undertook the report?
I'm afraid I don't recall off the top of my head who the company was, but I can dig that out and send it to you. Yes, it was a really positive exercise. For the second time in a row, we were among the best performing contact centres of any of the councils that they deal with. So it was really positive, and I know it had, it boosted the morale of the contact centre to see that their good work had been recognised so well. We did send a more detailed report, I think, to a previous Scrutiny Overview Committee. It might be worth us resending that round so that actually members got some more of those details, because it was a really positive report.
I think that's reasonable to send that information round. Councillor Lehman, would you agree?
Yeah, that would be very helpful, just to know who undertook which company did it. And when was the How Are We Doing feedback survey launched, please?
Sorry, Councillor, was that how long ago was it launched, did you say?
When did it begin? So
Thank
reading
you.
through the narrative, it says that we've changed from a general customer satisfaction survey to this How Are We Doing feedback survey, and I just wondered when that change had taken place.
Thank you for that. Anne Ainsworth or Jeff Membry? We've got Kevin Ledger online, I think.
Yeah, we've had Kevin Ledger online, I think. Kevin,
yeah, lovely. Kevin Ledger.
Hi there. Yeah, just to confirm that we originally launched the feedback survey in January, and it was a bit of a soft launch to see how things went, and we didn't receive a very significant uptake in relation to that. So I would need to go back and confirm exactly what month it was. However, I can say that it was during Q2 that we refreshed the survey and made it much shorter, so that it's much easier for respondents to complete. And we have started to promote that far more actively in the last month or so. One example where it was promoted was at an employers forum run by our business support team. They had some banners up there, and we're giving out some flyers to encourage people to respond, to give their feedback if they have any about the services that the team offer, and we received quite a few responses off the back of that. So that's the sort of thing that we want to continue to do in order to drive those responses. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Kevin. That's really good to know. I'm just wondering if it was being put in our magazine, and also whether it might come along to sort of big events that we're having, like the Christmas fair, for instance. Thank you.
Lovely. Yes.
Sorry, I've been able to find my report now. The company's called Insight 6. Sorry, I didn't have it immediately to hand.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And in terms of it going into the magazine, has that been noted? Is that a thing that could happen?
Yes, although the current production of the magazine is I think, sealed just about now.
Okay.
So we'll have
maybe
to do it into the next edition. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, did you have anything else? No. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank the officers for the work they've done in the Community Safety Partnership Group and in the enforcement team who are hunting out and removing fly tips. They've done a really good job. It's all come up as green, which is fantastic. But it makes such a difference to our local residents that if they're reporting something, they see it removed. And I know some of these have been on private land, which is the private landlord's, landowner's responsibility. But certainly around our communities, my impression is these are being dealt with much more quickly, and that's great because it doesn't then attract further fly tipping near them. I also wanted to note the fact that, and I haven't got the KPI in front of me, but it has been added into the narrative since our previous scrutiny and overview meeting, which is that the amount of waste that we're collecting had reduced. And we've now got a graph that I think probably thanks to Councillor Stobart's request is now going on a rolling mean. And what that shows is that two things. One is that the amount of residual waste we're dealing with is dropping. And I think that's because our residents are being more careful about what they buy and more careful about making sure they don't have materials to throw away. Also, obviously, the total waste reduction was a result of it being much hotter and drier, and there wasn't as much green waste. But, you know, I think our waste service are doing an absolutely brilliant job, and I just wanted to congratulate the teams for working across that whole broad range of things to improve the environment in our district. So thank you very much.
Councillor Milnes, please.
I just wanted to add one aspect of that in terms of waste, and we did an offer recently with a compost bin provider, which are relatively small bins, not dissimilar sizes to our existing waste bins, and that was a much reduced cost, I think less than £50 for a complete kit, and I've got to say they reduced dramatically the amount of waste that is going into the green bin. I don't know where it magically goes to, but I can attest that it produces compost in a very effective way.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
There is a specific page reference, but I'll get it wrong. There is a specific page reference, Chair. I've got 894, but even if you haven't got that in front of you, about the food waste collection, the progress, and we've had some updates on that, but we wanted to ask the biodigester to which the food waste will be delivered. Do we understand more of that? I'd be happy to take a question after the event or an answer after the event. So the food goes to a biodigester, what happens then?
Councillor Milnes.
Baudier-san is online, if we could ask that to
Baudier-san.
Thank you. I'm through you, Chair. The food waste we're collecting is going to be going to an anaerobic digestion facility, like Councillor Stobart said. It's a local facility within Cambridgeshire. It's one that's been contracted by the County Council. The majority of the produce will be turned into biodigester gas and then turned into electricity, fed back to the grid. And then the remainder will be a soil enhancer for agricultural use. So the bulk of that is green electricity.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Through you, Chair, that's, I suppose, much as I expected, but it would be great to have some more detail in due course about how it's going. Obviously, it's not started yet, but to understand, for example, what energy contribution that's making.
Lovely.
So, thank you.
Okay.
I think,
Noted.
Boday's nodding there, so I think that's been taken on board.
I have just
Please do, yeah.
So one of the items that's identified with the purple strip, it's completed, is the climate conference, which this year, of course, was held at Stories Field Centre in Eddington, and by any standard, was a great success. It was well attended. The agenda was very lively, and the kind of discussions, that I was involved with, other people were involved with, were very lively and perhaps directed more at issues around biodiversity and nature recovery. That was a theme. But please, let's keep that going, and maybe look at some changes of emphasis to involve different people, and keep the momentum going. I think it's to be warmly congratulated.
I think I'm getting nods from Councillor Milnes there. Yeah, happy with that? Yeah, lovely. Do we have any other speakers on this item? No, okay. Well, I think we've noted the report and done as the recommendation asks us to do. So I think we'll move on to the next agenda item. I'm aware Councillor Lehman's going to leave the room for this item, as disclosed at the beginning of the meeting. So this item is item 7, the Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund summary report, pages 911 to 928. Who would like to start on this? Councillor Paul Bearpark.
So these are obviously quite significant pots of grant funding, but then on page 915, section 19, key highlights, the first words are given the short delivery timeframes. So I was wondering, to what extent does such short delivery timeframes mean that the number of applicants for this funding means it's quite restricted? Because I do think that it's probably very sensible to have as many applicants as possible to kind of increase the quality of the applications, and therefore how the grant funding is spent. And obviously I've noted as well that it's come through the CPCA, this funding, and I wondered if that kind of coming from central government through the CPCA to us is one of the reasons why there were such short delivery timeframes.
Okay, so I'll bring in Councillor Peter MacDonald on this. I think he was joining us online.
Thanks, Chair.
believe. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, Chair. Good evening. Good evening.
Evening.
So to try and answer Councillor Bearpark's questions, two things. So if we trace the history of this, it goes back to 2022, all the way through to this year, 2025. And originally it was part of the government's Levelling Up Fund. That came to us quite late, or came to the Combined Authority quite late. And to optimise the funds, it's important that all the authorities get together and make sure, all the individual district councils get together and make sure that the criteria that are being applied are fair right across the Combined Authority patch. And that just takes some time, especially as it was a completely new scheme. Now, what's happened since then? So that was the case in 2022. As it's gone on since then, 2023, 4 and 5, all the districts, including South Cambridgeshire, have got more familiar, more up to speed with the programme, and more objective in terms of how it's rolled out and how it's assessed. So what we have now is a much quicker, much more robust, clear set of guidelines, clear set of criteria that all those districts sign on to. And to put it another way, they've got the hang of doing this, both for the community programmes and the business programmes. I hope that answers the question.
I think that's very useful information and gives us a clear background. Councillor Paul Bearpark, please.
No, thank you very much for that, Councillor MacDonald. I suppose it's around anything, is there anything else we can be doing to kind of drive the number of applications And are you satisfied with the number of applications we've had for these grants to date?
Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's got better and better. The comms team and the business team working with Anne Ainsworth have really worked hard to make sure that the messages get out there, but more importantly, they get out there in sufficient time, because especially for business grants or capital grants, you know, they take some time to get together. If you look at some of the work that the Grants Advisory Committee does, which are relatively small grants, relatively straightforward, and they've been doing that, you know, for years, that program works pretty seamlessly. Whereas very often with this program, not only does it require a lot of pump priming communication, but then officers often have to visit the businesses to, you know, check on whether they're in a good position to make a proposal, take the money and implement it. So yeah, the communications area, I would say it's getting better and better every time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Bearpark.
No, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So my question concerned the kind of publicity that recipients of the grant can make. I understand that the Combined Authority is keen on, if you will, publicity and communication around projects, you know, the progress, the achievement and so on. But general question, how is that going? Can it, you know, is there need for improvement? Is it considered successful? What's the story?
Yeah, very good question. And I think you put your finger on something good. So I would say both at the community level and the business level. So the communication, if you like, in the senior teams in both those organisations is pretty good. And it's recognised, and it's recognised in the leadership teams, and it's cascaded. But the cascade down to a lower level, and sometimes with the community projects, I think there's still scope for improvement. I mean, sometimes we euphemistically say, oh, can we give a blue plaque, you know, that says this is, and we would say, look, this is government combined authority source money, but with the implementation through the district. And so I think there is still room for improvement in terms of that communication, so that it reaches really the lowest level in the organisation or the community.
Councillor Stobart.
Peter, it might be through you, Chair. Might be worth perhaps identifying a few examples, businesses in our wards where they've wanted to make publicity. Have they been successful? Could we help them? I know I can think of several that we could just tap and say, has that worked for you? How could we make it better?
I'm just going to bring in Anne Ainsworth.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that, because that's actually a challenge that I was putting to the team last week, to the business support team, because there is so much fantastic work that's going on. As you know, we do a lot to publicise our local businesses, and particularly many of our small businesses across South Cambridgeshire. So there's always that opportunity to do more around case studies, which I think is partly what you're speaking to there. So we did talk about how the team could look to do more case studies, get more information out about that. We were looking at our own council website, we were looking at Visit South Cams, and also, of course, working with members. So it's fantastic what you're saying. We would love to work more with members and with our local businesses to develop more of that case study history, and then be able to promote that, both for the businesses and for the community groups who are successful through these grants as well.
Councillor Stobart.
No, that sounds great. There's action, and I think we could circulate amongst members, who've had businesses in their wards awarded grants, and see what we could do.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stobart. Do we have any other speakers on this item, or any other questions that people wanted to ask? I don't think we do. So if we look at the recommendation, I think we've done that on page 911 and noted the report essentially. So is everybody happy that we've had a look at that and noted it? Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you. So we will move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair.
So the next item on our agenda is the work programme, which you have on pages 929 to 946, and that's set out as in the papers. Obviously, if you, as members, have anything that you want to amend or bring to either Councillor Stephen Drew or myself, please do so in the usual way, but it's set out in front of you there. Does anybody have anything they wanted to raise on that? Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be the 8th of December. At the same time, so 5:30, I believe. So that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you all very much for attending, and thank you to the lead members for coming and taking those, and officers that have stayed for a very long meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.